Welcome to this episode of Life Science Success. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Don, and I'm a digital marketer. And before we hop into today's interview with Sanj, I just wanted to play a quick message from our sponsor.
Of Life Science Success is brought to you by D3 Digital Media Marketing. Dive into the digital world with confidence and creativity on your side. D3 Digital Media Marketing is your all-in-one solution for making a lasting impact online. From the vibrant, engaging world of social media marketing, podcasts, and webinars, to the strategic depths of website development, SEO, pay-per-click, email, and content marketing, we tailor our approach to fit your unique brand story. Let's elevate your presence, connect with your audience, and drive success together. Your digital journey starts here. Visit d3digitalmedia.com to learn more.
In this episode of Life Science Success, my guest is Sanj Singh. He's the CEO of Temple Therapeutics with over 18 years of leadership experience in pharma, and he's pioneering female-focused precision medicine for gynecological disorders, drawing on his extensive background in executing high-value asset transactions and successful startup exits. So with that, thank you so much, Sanj, for being on. I greatly appreciate having you here.
Well, first of all, Don, I want to extend my gratitude to you to extend the invitation to me and happy to share this. So quite humbled by the request. Yeah.
No, it's great to have you. And, I feel like there are so many, populations in, our communities that are underserved. And oftentimes, more specifically, there are gynecological, things that have needs that, frequently are unmet. And so, I'm sure will be a great conversation today. But before we hop into that, would you mind just sharing a little bit about yourself and what sort of led you to this point in your career?
Well, look at it. If somebody said, I'm going to script your life, it's quite rare. It's usually you enjoy the journey and you embrace all the possibilities that are provided if you're open to it. So, for those from an academic background, went through business school, did an MBA in biotechnology management in the early 2000s. And this is, I think it was on the cusp, right after the dot-com bubble crash. And then you had this whole idea of technology management and so forth. But really, since I graduated out of business school back in the mid 80s, and I know I'm dating myself, I'm 58 years old, father of four and grandchildren to, three grandchildren. My academic background was in marketing, finance, and international business, and it was actually I suppose being surrounded by a whole host of physicians, and I think in Indian culture you have this either you're a doctor or you're a doctor. There is no there is no other choice. Maybe an engineer, and professor, but business in our culture is not necessarily one of those things that your mom and dad, aspire to, especially if they're physicians. So I was surrounded by physicians all my life. My mom was an OBGYN. She passed last year after 55 years of service to her patients. My brother, the prodigal son, the oldest, is a surgeon, so he cleared the path for all of us. But here's the interesting thing, and then my four children, who are adult children, there three of them are daughters, and they're all in healthcare. So really, I think it's a crazy journey that led me to forming this company, and it could be a podcast in itself because it's not necessarily something that was designed; it evolved, and it was by just listening. So, I have a business background, but I love biology and science. I think the human body is amazing, which is kind of what the temple, body's your temple. It has all the mechanisms to restore balance. And when you're in disease state, you're out of balance. And how do we adjust that? I mean, to put it simply. So really that's how it happened. It's a lot of collisions, a lot of conversations, a lot of pivots, and here we are.
No, perfect. And So, I mean, given kind of your background with startups and things like that, how has it sort of shaped the experience that you've delivered, in terms of leadership inside of the organization?
Yeah. So first of all, I tell a lot of young entrepreneurs who we mentor, don't do it. That's look at it because I say that not facetiously because it's what I've come to learn throughout all of the even prior to the biotech side, setting up companies. It's all it comes down to people and a compelling vision and the willingness to do something to what it takes and then model the way for them. Young entrepreneurs that we talk to say, look, before you can ask something from the network, you need to give to the network.
Mm,
And that's the same kind of philosophy within the company, is that there are times when you need this vision, this greater purpose that drives you beyond the transaction because it gets tough, especially in women's health. It's extremely tough and challenging, and you need those people around you. And really, so my job is really to find good souls to surround yourself with who see a purpose, and it could be different than mine, but there's some type of a sinew that kind of ties us together. And that's kind of been my leadership style. It's not, when you're talking with PhDs, MBAs, clinicians, they're well-educated people, they're smart people. Let them do what they do, and you just get out of the way. You take care of the issues that may cause bottlenecks for them. Do it quietly and just let them do their work. So I just have a privilege of sitting on the almost like you're watching a game, but you're also in the game, and you're watching these fantastic people do the work they do. It's just amazing, for me.
yeah, entrepreneurship is not the easy path in life, but at the same time, it
Nope.
is rewarding in its own way. It just is one of those journeys where you have to decide, I'm going to take a harder path to hopefully have the reward of also seeing something grow that you started, versus something that maybe somebody else started and
Yeah,
sort of set the boundaries for.
great. I think Reid Hoffman had that. You jump off a cliff and you assemble a plane on the way down. That's that's it's pretty much what it is, for the most part. Unless you're lucky to have, a venture fund that spins you out. But organic growth and organically you put a team together, it's extremely tough.
Yeah, absolutely. So could you share with us a little bit more about Temple Therapeutics? What is it that you do and what's your mission?
Yeah, if you asked this 8 years ago, Don, I think we'd have a different answer for you.
Mm,
So, but let me just give you you in the audience the kind of a succinct overview. Um, we're transforming lives, and that's kind of our vision. The and it goes beyond just the patients that we're going to serve, because when disease impacts, it impacts family, friends, colleagues, and so we have to think about that disease reaches out to all these tentacles. And that becomes really a centralized focus for us to say, okay, how do we transform lives, but also take into account all of the other ripple effects that happen when somebody has a disease. A young mother who gets, diagnosed with ovarian cancer, uh, and usually it's stage 3 and 4. It's devastating. The survival rates are low. So we're pioneering what I say, like the title says, a new era in precision medicine for women's health. And, you know, over the last, I would say 4 or 5 years, and particularly, I would say in the last 2, 3 years, I've been trying to understand, giving them a moment's OBGYN, my brother's a urologist, and I've got my oldest daughter's a professor of nursing in obstetrics and gynecology, a physio. I can't get away from women's health. So I hear about patient stories. And one of the things that I was trying to understand is what is the reason why women's health has not evolved innovative from an innovation standpoint? And so I boiled it down to two axioms that we go by. that epitomizes the challenge that women's health has had in innovation, but also speaks to our strategy. And the first one is if the data doesn't represent you, it may not suit you. And if you can agree with that, the next one is if you cannot diagnose a disease, how can you possibly even treat it or develop products for it?
Yeah.
And so that has led, we have Temple has three pillars, right? In gynecological cancers, endometriosis, and fibrotic disorders. And if you think about it as an OBGYN commercial footprint, so there's one of our KOLs is Dr. Antonio Gargiulo in Boston at Harvard. And he said, every hour, every day, I could use one of your products in managing my patients or managing my practice. So our head was around saying, how do we look at the whole patient pathway? And each pillar, what we've done is supported it according to those axioms by a foundation of validated biobanks. And these biobanks have data, clinical data, are DNA data, RNA data, every kind of data you would want. It's like a kid in a candy store for bioinformatics and people who are doing drug development, but it's related to the disease. And the critical part of that, those validated biobanks, and the key word is validated, is you also have prognostic data in there. So when you can screen targets, you know that this target is specific to that disease.
Mm.
And it's an exciting time because what we've learned just by conversations is that, especially the last bio, we had 47 meetings. I only requested like 5. It's never happened since 2008 because everybody said, hey, we want to talk to you about how to collaborate with your biobanks. And some of those biobanks have come to us through really good academic collaborations, like their Cedar-Sinai Prometheus deal that Merck had, and they purchased them out for like 10.8 billion. And that was again on Crohn's and other immune-related diseases. And the other ones have come either through an acquisition. So yeah, it's amazing to be able to discover, develop these novel therapeutics, and they're all firsts, right? I mean, and that's the advantage in women's health is it's just an open landscape. If
Yeah.
we're going to go develop products or diagnostics, it's going to be a first just by default. So yeah, that's kind of a little bit. Hopefully, gives some background on what we're trying to do.
And I mean, I do find it, interesting as well because there are so many things that have kind of come along, with regards to like cervical cancer, for example. There are things that that can be done in women's health, to prevent cervical cancer, but then also there are things that can be done in terms of long-term treatment as well, and even with that, there are so many other areas in women's health that are completely untreated and underserved, and it's an amazing landscape, but at the same time, a real I think spotlight in terms of the underserved population. So yeah.
Yes, yeah, it's definitely so. It's we almost have by default taken a contrarian view.
Hmm.
So, if the untapped potential is, all it's been well documented, right, by McKinsey and others of the massive gap, and we're just trying to do our part, and hopefully it models the way for others or collaborations, and it's maybe a small little pebble in the pond that has some type of a ripple effect for others, and it's yeah, and raise basically the old adage of lifting all boats through by raising the tide. So it's yeah, we're trying to do our thing, and hopefully once we're successful in getting one of these products out into serving patients, it will model the way for others. Yeah, or give them
So
at
what?
least hope that there
Yes,
is a chance, right? Yeah.
absolutely. So what are some of the key challenges and opportunities that you see in terms of developing therapeutics for underserved populations?
Yeah, that's another podcast, Don. That's uh let me and I think I said it's well documented, right? So you can just put up women's health gap, and you'll have tons of articles. And so I don't want to spend time. Let me frame it this way, and I don't know if you how many of your audience are Monty Python fans. Uh, but there's a skit of Sergeant Major walking up and down the square. I don't know if you're a fan of Monty Python, but
I don't know
I'll
this
give you a little
one,
bit
but
of,
yes, I
yeah,
am, but no.
yeah. So it's there's Sergeant Major has this plan to march up and down the square with his troops, and he's got all his troops lined up, and he announces to everyone, you know, what we're gonna do today is march up and down the square. Then he says, unless somebody here has something else on their mind that they want to do. And the first person raises his hand and says, "Well, to be honest," he goes, "I'd love to be at home with the wife and kids."
Mm,
He goes, "Right, off with you." And this happens throughout his whole troop. And at the end, the only person that is left is Sergeant Major walking up and down the square. That's how I feel in the women's health space.
mm,
We have spoken to with our bankers. I'd have to ask Stephen. I'm sure he's reached out to well over 300. And the responses have come from, pretty benign
mm,
to pretty malignant. And, what does that due to? So some of the challenges are that, the LPs are, it's not a mandate for them. They're, even Roche we were talking to, and they're in women's health, right? But now they're looking to get into GLP-1, right? Because
yeah.
that's the next thing, or immunotherapy. So it becomes this kind of chasing the what is hot,
Hmm.
and the money flows there. And unfortunately, talking to some of the private equity guys, one that we go to for just wise counsel, he said, "I'll tell you what some of the challenges for women's health companies are. There's no blockbusters."
Right.
And until you have a blockbuster, Wall Street is not going to take it seriously, and that trickles throughout the ecosystem. And it's kind of this, whether it's a myth or true, it doesn't matter because that's the perception, right? So, given that backdrop, again, going back to my first comment about don't do it, is okay. So knowing that those are all the constraints and you're going to get rejected,
Mm,
uh, how do you position yourself? What messaging do you do? So we didn't start out to be a women's health company. And I think but it's the opportunity is, like, as you said, it's completely underserved, which means there's a huge market potential. And it's up to us to communicate that optimism, and taking a little page out, and I'm Canadian, I'll take a little page out of one of your presidential candidates, uh, Kamala Harris, who said, let's turn the chapter
mm,
and let's stop talking about being victims of underfunding, under research, and talk about the opportunities that it provides. And when we talk about those type of messages and some of the things that we've done, it gets traction. Um, and it's not that it doesn't exist, all those problems. It's just reframing it. And that's why if you go on our website, it says redefining what is possible. Because when somebody says, "Oh, you're a women's health company," I said, "What does that mean to you?" And their definition is quite narrow.
hmm. Yeah.
And so I think, anybody that's working in this space, I think, can take that opportunity to, in their own way, to redefine what is possible and reframe that opportunity, and show them, hey, it's basics, comes back to business 101, right? Here's the market opportunity. Here's how we're going to execute. Um, and this is why. And you surround yourself with the people who are going to be buying it, paying for it, and all the same things that they would look at other ones. So for those investors who are looking for those, let's say, real 8-10 times return, it may be possible within this space where you have such untapped potential. So
It is always, I mean, just to sort of share a little of my perspective as well. So I mean, I sit on the executive, team of a women's health diagnostic company that is newly funded and, fighting all of these same battles. And it is very interesting to me that every sort of investor presentation that we have and things like that leads to a room full of men, right? So I mean, we're men.
Yeah.
The guys that sort of founded the company are both male, and then they hired myself, and then one other individual as executives in the group, and then we wind up in a room typically with other investors that are essentially also men, and I always sort of I liken everything back to I have two daughters, I have a wife, I have a mother that passed away of ovarian cancer. So I mean, all of
Oh,
this
sorry to
stuff
hear
is
that.
very sort of central to my life, right?
Yeah.
And then we start these conversations because we're a diagnostic company. Our whole goal is to try and diagnose this stuff early. And they're like, but the woman could also just turn around and go for a blood test. And I'm like, that's another appointment. It's not eating the next morning. It's going back to the doctor's office versus immediately getting an answer on this thing. And they're like, but people do this all the time. It's not that hard. And I'm like, yeah, but I mean, for me, whenever I have to go for a blood test, it's irritating. I don't have to eat I can't eat breakfast the next day. I got to make sure that I get over there, as early as possible, and try and start my day right afterwards. Versus something the physician could just do in their office. And I do. I mean, we have these sort of back and forth conversations. Then I typically walk out and just, share the same news with my wife. She's like, just invite me. I'll come in there and tell them I don't want to have to go
Yeah.
back. And I
Yeah.
oftentimes find it interesting that people just can't put themselves in somebody else's shoes, right? So I mean, that's the,
Yeah.
kind of my own personal journey with this as well is just, sort of put yourself in somebody else's shoes. It doesn't matter if you're a man or woman. It's not that hard to sort of envision the fact that living this, and especially if you're sick, would not be
Yeah.
pleasant.
Yeah, it's tough.
So,
Endometriosis is kind of similar where uh not only there's the only way to diagnose it is through surgery,
mhm.
but you actually have to convince someone to give you a referral to someone who knows what they're doing, number one. And the other challenge is the regulatory and reimbursement environment has genericized endometriosis because they'll just put you on contraception pills, and that's a $5 solution.
Right.
It's not taking care of the disease, but it's managing the symptoms. So,
Mm.
there's an ecosystem, systemic thing that has to change. So, in order to make a difference in the endometriosis field, you have to come with a disease modifying
Yes.
strategy.
Right.
And until you do, it's a high bar. But if you have a validated biobank, you
Mm.
have that potential to do so. And I think going back to a lot of the things that has been written, they said, the women only got allowed in the early 90s into trials. There's just people don't, hospitals keep a lot of data. And the collaborations we have, these were, finding a needle in the haystack. And I'll give you one on the gynecological cancer uh, biobank. They've been collecting it since 1990 in a QMS system that is ISO certified.
Nice.
No one approached them. It's only because we had a collaboration through a Eurostars grant that we built a relationship. And I was like, and I went, hang on a second. There's a treasure chest of data here, and no one has. He goes, no, no one. And one of the big pharmas right in their backyard.
Wow.
He said, have no one, yeah. He goes, no, no one's ever contacted us.
Mm.
I said, well,
And
I'm
not
here. And it's so some of those serendipitous collisions, as I
right.
talk about creating collisions, is the power of collisions is incredible.
Yeah.
But you have to be curious and open to conversations and try to connect dots, right? But yeah, there's no magic formula. Let's put it that way. It's just keep digging, keep
Yeah, and
persevering.
longitudinal
Yeah.
data in a biobank for sure is valuable, especially whenever you're
Yes.
doing something like this as well.
Yeah.
So whenever you look at the way that Temple, approaches things, how does your company's approach to early uh, diagnostics and treatment, differ from other companies that are out there?
Well, yeah, maybe it's a good place to pick up on the biobank, right? So we everything starts with the patient and the clinician for us. We listen to them. I think it was just growing up in a family of physicians. It was just easy for me just to even our first product, which is on a drug for postoperative adhesions. My brother's a surgeon. My mom's a surgeon. First of all, I asked him, "Is what are adhesions?" And they explained it to us, and I said, "Oh, what do you do with them now?" He said, "Not much." I said, "Oh, what would it mean if it was addressed?" "Oh, it would be massive." I mean, there's the simple questions about quick little, is there a market opportunity? So everything starts with the patient and the physician. And what we try to do is we understand, number one, what is the gap?
Mhm.
And how would this be utilized for the patient, like you said, about all of the inconveniences? And also for the physician, I said, what is the best patient pathway for you and your patients to address this? So we're thinking about design, and then also then the data is there. So they kind of go hand in hand about thinking, how is it going to be applied in everyday, right? Rather than just coming up with a technology that may do something, but it'd be really hard because some complementary assets or resources are not present to make it viable, right? Or you don't have the right constituents on board. So we're
Yeah.
thinking the downstream application and building it into the early stages of design, and then using patients and clinicians feedback in the design. So it's a very market pull, demand pull type of approach, as opposed to saying, hey, we have a novel target and we're going to develop this. And maybe they haven't talked to patients or clinicians. I don't know. Um, and I think that comes maybe because I've been exposed to the clinical settings just by my connections,
Hmm.
that my mind thinks that way, right? So that's one aspect. And then what we do in developing is that because you have the biobank, you're screening, right? So, and this is not like it's taken like the one that we're about to acquire, it's taken them 10 years to build a biobank. And it's validated so that it's, it gives you uh, a real deep insight and maybe a head start in validating those markers. So at Bio, for example, Don, we had quite a few companies approach us who were working on early endometriosis assets, targets that were non-hormonal, right? And it's important in that place because, as one FDA person said, Lord help us that we don't need another hormonal endometriosis product. Um, and I said to them, look at, give us the information on your target. Let us screen it in our biobank because we want to have a biomarker strategy to our therapeutic.
Hmm.
We don't believe endometriosis is one disease. We think, like oncology, there's cohorts, right? Because it's a disease of theories. Nobody really knows. But the biomarker allows us to maybe stratify patients and then find novel targets for those cohorts and then develop it and have that kind of personalized precision medicine that we're talking about, which hopefully lead to disease modifying. That's the aspiration. If we're not disease modifying, we're not, that's our business. And it's either go big or go home because it's not going to be commercially adopted and it won't be paid for. So there's no point working on technologies that it may feel good and you get a patent on it, you may get regulatory approval on it, maybe, but it doesn't get commercially adopted. And that's so we're thinking that way. I don't know if that answers your question, but that's how we think
It's a
about it.
yeah,
It's a very integrated, uh, systematic view, looking at all the pieces of how it fits. Yeah.
very nice. In terms of the accomplishments that you've had, what is something that you feel most proud of with regards to Temple Therapeutics that you'd like to share with the audience?
Yeah, I think the number one is the our TX, product wise, I could share I think the number one thing I'm proud of is the team and the board,
Mm,
because there's a lot of successful people on there and there are no egos.
very nice. Yeah.
Just and that's the first thing. I'm very lucky, but also I think it was done by design. I look for good souls, that are they're value driven and they're purpose driven. It's not about, padding their resumes or, hey, because, Lord knows they don't want to be part of a women's health company because that's, people tell them, what are you doing? There's no blockbusters there, but I think it's that. I think it's that, let's say, collecting. I feel like, but it's again through collisions and conversations that we brought such brilliant people, not only on our board, but our advisors, like our clinical advisors at some of the top institutions. Like we've got collaborations, gosh, in the US at, in Michigan at some of the top universities there, in Boston. Um, and then you go across the pond from Sweden all the way down to Spain.
Mm,
So, uh, it's funny, my wife's in Spain right now doing the Camino with my daughter. I said, look, if you get into problems, I've got colleagues in Spain that can help you. Right? It's that type of, and I've had dinners with all of them,
mm,
just to because the personal relationships matter. And I think that's
yeah.
probably the biggest thing. And that allows the products stems from that, all the work. Because people are committed. I know one of them said, hey, the work that you're doing in endometriosis, that's noble. If you can pull this off, it will help hundreds of millions of women around the world and their families, because it's a devastating disease.
Yeah.
Um, I think that's, to me. I think, people may focus on the technologies and things like that, but I don't think it's possible without those collaborations and the people that are working on them. So I'm really lucky. It's really, I just sit there and go, sometimes pinch myself, go, how did this happen? Um, yeah. So I think that would be the biggest thing for me.
Very good. If you were to look out 5 or 10 years, what are some of the things that you're most excited about with regards to our industry? Where do you see the future? If you were to look into a crystal ball,
Yeah. Someone have that in biotech, that would be awesome.
right?
But maybe I can speak, maybe it's from our personal relation, our personal company here. This whole biobank, the if the data doesn't represent you, it may not suit you axiom, and if you can't diagnose a disease. We started this before the introduction of AI, or not the introduction, but the discussion of AI.
Right.
And we put out a press release. We seldom put out press releases unless and there's a reason for that, unless there is a substantial, data, disclosure. Uh, you get inundated with AI companies.
Hmm.
So we have the the data. And I remember one AI person who worked for big pharma, and he had left and he joined somebody else. He said to me, he goes, AI is going to do diddly squat for you. He goes, advanced bioinformatics will be more helpful to you because you actually have the clinical data. He goes, a lot of people are using AI to approximate
Yes.
things, but you actually have the data. So what I'm excited about for us is uncovering what I said, like for endometriosis. We published in November of 2023 a novel biomarker for early detection of ovarian cancer that came from the biobank.
Mm.
It picks it up in stage 1 and 2. And it's tied to the target that we presented at AACR for a therapeutic for ovarian cancer. Now, can you imagine that? Now, you had your mother, you said, that passed, right, from ovarian?
Yes, yes.
And it's usually stage 3 or 4.
Yeah,
And right, and you know those, but to be able to pick it up and screen it early and then have a therapeutic, maybe after, whether they do surgery, but just to be able to attack it early,
right,
that's exciting because you're saving, because it's like a semi truck that hits you, right? And you and your family at that time. So, and sometimes, a lot of times, it affects older women, ovarian cancer, and it robs them of the life they were thinking of doing because they worked their life to, enjoy at a certain time, right? I'm 58. We want to do
right.
certain things, but life sometimes comes at you in different forms to disrupt things. So, yeah, the ability to detect disease early, um, to solve problems that haven't been solved, like the adhesion product. There has been no drug ever approved to prevent postoperative adhesions since it was discovered 200 years ago, the condition. And we're in phase 3. We had a 93% efficacy on this drug. It also led to the formation of a new spin-out company in women's health for sports medicine,
Mm.
which is called Temple Orthobiologics. We're kind of using the Virgin brand of companies, it's to brand it because it's all women's health. Not that men can't use it, but women have a higher incidence. So I'm just excited about what our data that we have, that's biobank that we continue to build, is going to mean for patients who've been suffering and have been dismissed and ignored for so long.
Yeah.
And we listen to those stories all the time. I in fact have recorded them. Like that's why I have a podcast mic, because I actually spend time listening to their stories about what's happening to them. And that, yeah, that there's no day that is worse in biotech than what they experience on a daily basis. So it keeps
Right.
everything in perspective for me and our
Absolutely.
team. So yeah.
So, Sanj, what inspires you?
When well, I thought about this, right? Um, because people ask me this question a lot. And I went to what chokes me up,
Mm.
because that usually is what inspires you. And it came down to was ordinary people doing extraordinary things when no one is watching.
Hmm.
And or they're not posting it to say, hey, this is what I did.
Right.
Um, anyone who pursues a quest or challenge against all the odds, and whether they succeed or not, it's their effort to try to do something to contribute or add value in some way, to change something. Um, and it's never for self-glory. So I grew up in a family in India, and when you look back, you go, sometimes you don't know what has shaped you until you look back. They're all service. They're all in service of some kind. And um, even Einstein, when he was asked what is the meaning of life, he said to serve others, comma, only.
Mm. Mm.
That's it. And so what inspires me is people who, against all these odds, the hero's journey of taking on something, uh, you know, the Paralympians. There's a story from our province in Canada, Jacob Wasserman. So some of you may have heard of, in 2018, there was a horrible bus accident where you had 16 hockey players from our junior hockey league killed
Mm.
and 13 survivors, right? It was horrific. It was all over the news globally.
Wow.
Um, and the outstanding goaltender, Jacob Wasserman, one of the 13 survivors. So this was 2018. He was in the Paralympics rowing.
Hmm.
He won Canadian national champions in 2022, earned himself that spot. That individual he's paralyzed from the waist down. He was a hot prospect for the NHL goaltender. He found in that tragedy, and we've heard many athletes who were on that bus talk about what happened and what was it like uh, laying there in the bus, looking across, and your teammates are dead.
Uh,
Um, but finding a way to come out of that to me is and then I think maybe this is something a fellow in UK tells me. He goes, any other CEO, and of course one of the founders of Temple, but he goes, any other CEO would have given up, considering everything that you guys have battled to get here, because it's not an area that nobody wakes up on January 2nd and at next week in JP Morgan is thinking about, oh, I'm going to fund a company that has for post-operative adhesions. It's just not sexy.
right.
But there's 411 surgeries done every minute, every hour in the world. And so it's a big problem and nobody's paying attention to it. And I think, we'll have that. So that's what inspires me. Just ordinary people doing these extraordinary things
Thank
and
you for
random acts of kindness, right?
yeah. Well, thank you for sharing that. What concerns you?
Media and social media. That's
Mm. And here we
yeah, and
are.
AI. Yeah, and AI and information age and algorithms. And it's a tool that can be utilized for good or bad. And I think the challenge is that lies, fantasies, delusions, fiction are not vetted by the social media companies. And their algorithms just amplify it.
Mm.
And it becomes truth. And I was watching uh, an interview with one of the fellows that has written the book Nexus. It's be good. Harari, his last name is, and he used the witch hunt in Salem as an example, and how Gutenberg's printing press led to widespread burning at the stake, because one person, one village idiot, talking about stupid things is contained. Once it gets put on paper and spread across, then after a while they go, geez, some of this must be true. And you see
Right.
some parallels in the US presidential election. And I think that's what concerns me, because not only it impacts where the real, let's just say, uh, a driving towards truth, because I don't know if anybody actually knows absolute truth,
Right.
but
Sure.
driving and having that. So that's what concerns me. It's how the corporations that control that platform and those dials, how they wield this new tool. Will it be hammered or destroy or built? That's
Mm.
because it can impact science too,
Sure.
right?
Yeah. Well,
I
this,
mean,
yeah,
took a look at the vaccination and the whole, you know, that. I mean, that's just a taste of things. Yeah, yeah.
absolutely. And the last question, what excites you?
Being a spouse, parent, grandparent. Yeah. When my grandson Emmett, he's 7, asked, "Hey, Grandpa, can I come over for lunch?" I said, "Sure, you can." I said, "Can you throw me in the air?" He's still 7. I was at the gym. I have to work out because somebody asked me, he goes, "Man, you're 58. What do you do all this workout for?" I said, my grandson, he goes, 7 years old. He still wants me to throw him in the air.
Right.
I need good shoulders for that. He goes, "Are you coming to my practice or game?" Right. It's those moments. My 4 children, I said they're 27 to 38. Um, when they call me or want to do things with me or ask, "Hey, can we join you and your mom on a vacation?" That says something. How do you judge if you've been a good parent? There's 3 things. I heard a rabbi saying this, and it kind of resonated. I asked my kids. I said, "Hey, I need to validate this." I said, are you embarrassed to be seen with me in public?
Mm.
They said, no, it's absolutely not. I said, you're just not, making that up, are you? Like, you're telling me the truth. Um, do they run to you for advice or do they run away from you? Uh, they come to us seeking advice. And then, do we support them in things they want to do and not necessarily what we want them to do? That's it excites me to see what they have done and what their children are going to do. That's for my wife and I. That's I said to her the other day, I said, if we left tomorrow, they'll be okay.
Hmm.
Um, yeah, that's to keep things in perspective, right? That's what excites me. Yeah.
Very exciting indeed. Well, Sanj Singh, thank you so much for being on the Life Science Success Podcast. I greatly appreciate you being here and for telling us about Temple Therapeutics and the underserved populations that you're working to serve. So thank you very much for being on.
Well, thank you, Don, for the opportunity, and yeah, good luck with everything you're doing, and I appreciate it very much. So.
Thank you.